Watch Nigel Farage eviscerate frightened rabbits Keir Starmer in a fiery speech delivered in Wales. Farage pulled no punches as he zeroed in on Starmer's leadership, or lack thereof, labeling him a timid figure incapable of tackling Britain's most pressing challenges. With his trademark wit and sharp rhetoric, Farage painted Starmer as a leader paralyzed by indecision, unwilling to confront the hard truths about immigration, crime, and the spiraling cost of living. The speech was a rallying cry for those fed up with what Farage dubbed Starmer's fearful, floundering approach, solidifying the Reform UK leader's place as a bold alternative to Labour's faltering leadership. Now, check this video.
The leader of His Majesty's loyal opposition, Sir Keir. I mean, did you watch him on telly last night? Looking like a frightened rabbit, unable to answer a question straight. No one knows who he is, what he stands for. He says he comes from a humble origin, but his uncle owned a castle just down the road from him in Surrey. The story of his father being a humble toolmaker will be exposed also in the next few days. He flips and he flops, and he is absolutely as dull as ditch water, no question.
Nigel Farage's use of terms like eviscerate instantly establishes a combative and attention-grabbing tone, casting himself as the fearless outsider while framing Keir Starmer as a timid and ineffective leader. The mocking moniker Frightened Rabbit serves as a sharp, memorable critique of Starmer's perceived hesitancy, resonating with voters frustrated by perceived inequities in his policies, especially in areas like policing and justice. This nickname underscores claims of favoritism and double standards, a deeply damaging narrative for any leader. Events like the Southport attacks and the alleged leniency toward career criminals over protesters reinforce these criticisms, allowing Farage to weaponize the label effectively and embed it firmly into public discourse. Starmer's portrayal as paralyzed by fear and indecision feeds into Farage's broader narrative of establishment politicians being out of touch and ineffective. By honing in on issues like immigration, crime, and the cost of living crisis, Farage positions himself as the voice of the silent majority seeking decisive action. The frightened rabbit label amplifies existing doubts about Starmer's leadership, particularly on polarizing topics, leaving him vulnerable to sustained attacks. Starmer's struggles to emotionally connect with voters make him an easy target for such caricatures, especially when juxtaposed against Farage's populist rhetoric. Starmer's attempt to shift the narrative by emphasizing support for frontline emergency workers highlights his effort to align with shared values. His descriptions of their trauma and sacrifice add a humanizing touch, but fail to address the underlying criticisms of systemic inequality and inconsistency. This strategic misstep allows Farage's critiques to dominate the conversation. Polling data reflects the damage. According to Ipsos Mori, 61% of voters, and even 39% of Labour supporters, are dissatisfied with Starmer's performance. These numbers signal that the nickname and its underlying message are striking a chord with the public. Controversial policies like national insurance hikes, winter fuel cuts, and perceived inaction on the Channel migrant crisis compound the narrative of inefficiency and unfairness. Farage's strategic framing of two-tier policing and justice during Mackay's crystallized widespread frustration into a digestible critique. By focusing on fairness and equality, values that resonate across political divides, Farage ensured his attack had broad appeal. This approach aligns seamlessly with his ongoing critique of the establishment, cementing his position as a voice for disillusioned voters. The brilliance of Farage's approach lies in its simplicity. The nickname is easily understood, repeated, and weaponized as a potent political tool. By highlighting establishment failures, Farage bolsters his own image as a champion of the people. With Reform UK gaining momentum, this line of attack further strengthens his narrative and reinforces his growing influence in the political landscape.
I have real concerns about this, because whether you supported Brexit or not, it's back to this blooming old argument of whether you supported it or not, there was a democratic decision.
Yeah, it was.
And therefore, shouldn't that be carried through? Well, Of course, as Peter quite rightly says, the government says, well, we're not reversing Brexit, we're not going back into the EU, but we are doing actually all these other things, which basically means we may as well be back in.
But what worries me then is we're going to have to pay a price for that because, I mean, look at the attitude of the rest of the European Union when we did pull out. It was very much as though they wanted to punish us. Why would they indulge us by giving us the bits back that we want? You know, like freedom of movement for students or whatever.
But why
they will want us to pay a price.
Why do we even want freedom of movement for students?
Some students do.
Some students do, but it's got to be the minority. It's got to be a minority. So we've got plenty of students who go in and out of the United States. There's not freedom of movement there, so there's got to be ways around it for the very few who want to do it. I don't know. I just think it's extraordinary, all this sort of thing. And
I'm just worried they'll pull back the bits they sound what they want, what Labour has always wanted, I guess, and we'll have to pay quite a steep price for it in certain ways. Don't quite know how, but deals will be done that we may not be entirely happy about.
I just think, what damage does it do to the democratic process in this country if something happens and a few years later it's just all...
Yeah, it was a referendum.
All but reversed in everything but name. Then what's the point? How do we have any faith in anything that we vote for anymore?
Well, we're asking you your opinion, as ever. And in our poll of the day, we're asking, will the government's economic policy avoid recession? That's an interesting one. We'll be bringing you the live results throughout the day, so do make sure to stay tuned. Final result announced later on, of course, in Nana Akwe's show.
Prime Minister Keir Starmer's decision to attend a high-profile youth summit early next year is already being framed by critics as the most audacious act of Brexit betrayal to date. For those skeptical of Starmer's intentions, this move reinforces long-standing claims of his preference for closer ties with the EU, despite the Brexit mandate delivered by voters in 2016. The timing, on the cusp of Brexit's 5th anniversary, feeds into a growing narrative that Labour is quietly steering Britain back into the EU's sphere of influence. For Leave supporters, the symbolism is stark. The meeting is perceived as an erosion of the UK's hard-won sovereignty and a potential step toward creeping reintegration. Critics argue that proposed trading and security partnerships could pave the way for deeper political alignment, even as Starmer insists otherwise. The optics alone, sitting at the table with you leaders, provide ample fodder for those warning of a betrayal of Brexit's core principles. On the other hand, Starmer's allies frame this as a pragmatic effort to boost the UK's economy and security amidst mounting global instability. Closer ties with the EU could mean smoother trade agreements in critical sectors such as energy and technology, addressing pressing domestic challenges like inflation and supply chain disruption. This approach could appeal to Remain leaning voters and moderate Brexiteers who prioritize tangible economic outcomes over ideological purity. However, this strategy carries significant political risk. Starmer is likely to inflame tensions with Leave voters and right-leaning media who will amplify accusations of betrayal. Nigel Farage and Reform UK are poised to seize this opportunity, framing Starmer as the quintessential establishment figure undermining the Brexit legacy. For Labour, this could reinforce perceptions that the party is disconnected from the working-class communities that overwhelmingly supported leaving the EU. The Conservatives, despite their own disarray, will position Starmer's diplomacy as a capitulation to EU influence rather than an act of statesmanship. The summit risks reigniting the long-dormant debate between sovereignty and cooperation, deepening the divide between pro-Brexit and pro-EU camp. Labour's delicate balancing act, keeping Remain supporters engaged while not alienating Brexit heartlands, becomes even more precarious. Starmer must deliver tangible benefits from this engagement, or risk losing trust among Leave supporters and further complicating Labour's electoral calculus. If successful, the summit could showcase Starmer as a pragmatic leader focused on practical solutions, contrasting sharply with perceived conservative incompetence. However, a misstep or insufficient gains could embolden critics within Labour and galvanize opposition forces like Farage's Reform UK. This high-stakes gamble could either solidify Starmer's credentials or define his premiership as one of miscalculated risk and divisive outcomes. Sell t-shirts shipped from 4,000 miles away is a self-inflicted wound that directly undercuts their anti-fossil fuel stance. The carbon footprint generated by overseas production and transportation is a glaring contradiction to their environmental message. Adding to the controversy, the reliance on low-paid workers in the Dominican Republic raises ethical questions about labor practices, feeding into the broader narrative of performative activism without accountability. For critics, this misstep is a goldmine, reinforcing claims that the group fails to practice what they preach and diminishing their moral authority. This revelation arms opponents with a potent critique, enabling them to question the group's integrity. For those on the fence, it introduces doubts about Just Stop Oil's authenticity and effectiveness. While loyal followers might dismiss the controversy, it risks alienating potential supporters who prioritize consistency and transparency in activism, an essential component for winning hearts and minds. Selling imported merchandise was an avoidable error. The group's failure to foresee the backlash and prepare a robust defense reflects a strategic blind spot. A commitment to locally sourced sustainable merchandise would have aligned with their mission and bolstered their credibility. Instead, the decision to ship products from overseas invites scrutiny and plays into the hands of their detractors. Critics have long portrayed environmental activists as disconnected from practical realities or guilty of selective ethics. This incident serves as a textbook example, reinforcing stereotypes of hypocrisy within the movement. For activist groups like Just Stop Oil, public trust and moral authority are invaluable assets. This controversy threatens to erode both, potentially alienating neutral observers and allies. Furthermore, with merchandise sales serving as both a visibility tool and a fundraising mechanism, the negative publicity surrounding these t-shirts could hurt the group's financial support. Media coverage has amplified the scandal, framing it as a story of hypocrisy that resonates with a broad audience. The simplicity of the critique, a group campaigning against fossil fuels using oil-dependent logistics, makes it a digestible and compelling talking point. Just Stop Oil might attempt to justify their actions by citing limited resources or emphasizing the importance of their broader mission. However, such explanations risk being perceived as excuses rather than meaningful accountability. A preemptive acknowledgement of the supply chain's environmental impact could have reframed the issue as a temporary compromise rather than a contradiction. Ultimately, the t-shirt controversy highlights a critical vulnerability for activist groups: the challenge of aligning ideals with actions. While the issue itself may seem minor, its symbolic significance magnifies its impact. Just Stop Oil must now strike a delicate balance, addressing the criticism without detracting from their core message. Failure to navigate this controversy effectively risks not only undermining their credibility, but also weakening their ability to mobilize public support for their cause. Thanks for watching. Stay connected. Don't forget to like and subscribe to keep up with our latest videos and stay ahead of the curve on the issues shaping our world. For even more, join our free Telegram group, link in the description, for uncensored, no-holds-barred discussions on the topics that matter most. Be part of the conversation. Your voice counts.